Hello everybody. It's been a long time since I posted something, so apologies for the long absence. But anyways, I'm back, and today I'm going to teach you how you can make light projectors, or in more technical terms, a gobo, or a light filter. Now, as the name suggests, we are going to be highlighting lights today and how we can project various things, specifically images, into our scene using said lights. Now, when you think of gobos, the easiest example that I can give you that best describes what a gobo is, well, it's basically the bat signal from Batman. So, in more technical terms, a gobo is an object or an image that's placed in front of a light source that controls how a light and a shadow is seen once it is lit. So in the case of the bat signal, the bat logo placed on the spotlight is the gobo. So when the spotlight is turned on and is radiating throughout the sky, you can see the bat logo. Now we know what gobos are. Let's apply them in a blender. So for an example, we'll be trying to create a scene from Blade Runner 2049 set in the Wallace HQ. Now this scene is widely known as the caustic corridor due to, well, surprise, surprise, large amounts of caustics in the scene. Now, if you don't know what caustics are, I already have a video discussing caustics and how you can simulate water caustics in Blender. I'll leave the link somewhere in the video, probably in the description if you want to check it out. Now, for our scene here, well, sure, we can simulate caustics if we really want to, but the problem with simulating caustics, if you simulate them with high amounts of detail, it can take a long time to render. Worst case scenario, it can crash your computer if it's a little bit below average in terms of specs. So to quote unquote fake the caustic look, we'll be using a gobo to present our caustics in our scene. All we really need is a caustic map to serve as the image that we will cast in our environment. So first and most obvious thing we need is our fake caustic, our gobo, or our caustic map. Now, I already have a caustic map that I prepared, which I just randomly found on the internet. So this one's it. All right. So I'm going to be leaving the link in the description down below if you want to download it for yourself. Or if you're one of my students and you're in my Discord server, all resources, including the project files and basically everything that I'm going to be using in this video, will be available to download there. Now, these maps are easy to find. You can just Google caustics maps and you'll find yourself some really good ones, including this one. So, what a caustic map should look like, it'll be using a black to white gradient, where the lighter shades will be the greater highlights and will be more pronounced in the lit areas of the light. And darker shades will basically, well, it's probably not going to show nothing. It's not going to show anything really. It's just going to be blending in with the light color. So as you can see here, the light strand part shown will be the form of the water, so it's a pretty well-defined caustic map. Plus, the map is seamless too, so no problems on seeing the seams if you want to animate, which you can totally do. Lastly, of course, we're going to need our model. Now, this model, I already made it beforehand. It's not a perfect copy, which is fine. We're not fully copying the scene anyway, just the whole concept and type of setting. So with that in mind, we can get started with our small little project right here. Now, I already have my scene set up with the model, and as you can see, I already have my camera as well. If you want to copy my camera settings, it's going to be right here. So I'm going to select this. Here it is. The focal length is 14 millimeters, and that's basically it. You can just position it anywhere you want. So what I want you to do, you can pause the video right now and just place your camera and come back here once you're good and done. Now, aside from the standard camera settings, you can also add a depth of field as well by simply adding an empty object. So let's do just that. So let's add an empty object. So Shift A, we're gonna go to our empty, and the plane axis should be fine for this little focused object right here. So plane axis, you're gonna add that. Once you add it into your scene, you're gonna select your camera and then go to your camera properties right here, and then you're going to select depth of field, you're going to enable it, and then for the focus on object, you're going to click this one and select your empty. Now for the depth of field part, of course you need to adjust your depth of field if you want on how you want it to be. You can make it shallow or you can make it deep. If you want a shallow depth of field where the camera is solely focused on your object and everything is going to be blurred, the value should be near 0 but not completely 0. So it could either be 0.1 or 0.2. Now, if you want a narrow depth of field where there are no sort of blurs around your scene, it should be way greater than 0. So that's basically it for your aperture and for your depth of field. So once you have your camera set up, now we can do the lighting. So I'm going to be using my camera right here. Now, my tip for you guys is if you're trying to copy a scene, definitely work on using your camera perspective and then set your lights from here. That way you can easily tell if you're doing the right thing when it comes to positioning your lights. Now, based on our reference, if we can look at it right here once again. So the scene only has one main source of lighting, which is placed at the top. Now, normally, if there were no caustics involved, or we would simulate our caustics, an area light should be good enough. But since we are going to be using a Gobo, we are locked in to using the spotlight, which, if you can already tell, a spotlight is definitely a hard light source to work with if you're going to be using it as a main light source. However, to easily set up our lighting, we can actually make use of an area light to generally adjust where our light should be placed before we either place a new spotlight or maybe we can replace it with a spotlight. So let's add an area light. So Shift A and then go to our light and add an area light. Now I'm just going to position this to how I would want it to be, just to generally take a good look at it if I think it's going right. So I'll be back. Okay, so I'm generally happy of the position. I think if I'm going to be switching over to cycles right now, it should give off the right type of render that I'm looking for. So let's just set up our light to try and mimic what we have in our reference as well. Actually, before that, we should probably switch over to cycles, because if we want to use a Gobo, we are kind of locked into cycles because we are going to have to use nodes to alter our light. So let's go to our render properties and set our engine to cycles. Actually, let me go back to solid mode first. Set my engine to cycles, set it to GPU compute. Okay, that's good. And then while we're at it, let's lower our sample count to something low, like 20, and let's turn on our denoise. So let's take a look at it now. Okay, so it does look similar to what I want, but I think it needs a little bit of adjusting. Maybe right around here. I'm looking at my reference right now, my second monitor. So I think this one is relatively close if I try and look at it. Yeah, it's relatively close. So I'm going to go with this one for now because, like I said, this is not our main light source. We are not going to be using an area light. We are going to be changing it into a spotlight. So let's do just that. So once I change it to spotlight, as you can see, it's definitely not how I envision it. We're going to need to make a lot of changes right here, especially on how the light is currently looking. Definitely, we're going to want to adjust our power to something more brighter because I definitely can't see everything in here. So I'm gonna just adjust my intensity right here, and then I'm gonna be adjusting the spot size and the radius if possible. So let me just get back to it. Okay, so I'm pretty satisfied with what we have for now once I replace my area light with a spotlight. So what I did here is I just adjusted my intensity. I doubled my intensity back from 4,000. Now it's in 8,000. I adjusted my radius to 0.2 because I do want a little bit of a softer shadow for now before I add in my Gobo. As for the spot size right here will basically adjust how big how large the light is covered in my scene, in my environment right here, how large the light should cover the scene. So once I adjusted it, I think at 88.6 should do well. So if you want to copy the settings right here, go ahead, pause the video, and come back to me. Now, like I said, it's going to be our render engine is going to be locked into cycles because we do need to use nodes to alter our light. So I already have my engine set to cycles. The denoisers are on. The max samples are good. Now going back to our spotlight, let's add our gobo. So to add our gobo, we're going to be using use nodes. So let's just click on use nodes. And then we're going to go to our shader graphs. So we're going to go to our shading workspace. And it's going to be over right here. So I'm going to turn on my render mode to see our current render. Okay, it's looking like that. Now to add our gobo, we're going to need an image texture. So let me just turn on my screencast. There we go. All right. So we need to add an image texture. So we're going to press Shift A. And then we're going to search for image texture. So once we have that, we're going to plug in the color to our color. And then we're going to find our caustic map. Okay, now we've added our caustic map. Definitely, it's going to look a little bit weird because our emission strength is what's controlling our intensity right now. So why don't we try and adjust our intensity for our emission shader, try to 100, just so we can see something in our scene. Okay, now we added our image texture, but currently it's not looking right because we can't see our texture, our caustic map. We can't see anything. It's just our normal light. So what we're going to do is we're going to add our mapping nodes and our texture coordinate nodes. So if you have Node Wrangler enabled, you can just press Control T, select your image texture, and then press Control T. So there we go. Now we have our mapping and our texture coordinate. But as we can see, sorry, I'm stuttering right now. So as you can see right now, it's still not working right because the problem here is the texture coordinate node is using a UV input to our mapping node, which doesn't make sense. Light is not exactly a tangible 3D object, so it doesn't have any sort of UV data to be read, thus rendering our image texture incorrectly. So what we want to do is we want to use our normal input. So just plug in normal to the first vector of our mapping node, and there we go. We have our caustic map visibly present in our environment. Now the only thing that we need to do is, of course, adjust our scales if we want to. So let's try to make this one a little bit smaller. Let's try to make this 110. Let's try to see our caustics. Okay, there we go. So we're seeing our caustics right now. So there we go. Let's try to make it a little bit larger. Let's try 12. Okay, not quite visible, but that's completely okay. We can adjust our locations if we want to. And as you can see, once I'm adjusting my locations, the image is moving and you don't see any seams because the texture I'm using is seamless, which is good in my books right here. So there we go. That's basically it for our Gobo filter. I mean, our standard Gobo filter. But sure, we can stop here if you want to, but there's actually more we can do by playing around with our shader. Because as it stands, definitely, as you can see right here, it's looking a bit dull, and it's nowhere near how intricate our reference is, right? So with that in mind, I'm going to be sharing to you guys standard and complex variations of our Gobo filter right here. So what we're going to do now is, starting off with the standard variations, instead of a texture coordinate node, actually let me reset everything for now. Let's reset everything back to the default ones. Now, instead of using our texture coordinate node, actually maybe change our scale. Let's set it to 8 so we can see. All right, again, back to here. So instead of using a texture coordinate node, let's just remove that. And we're going to be replacing it with a input geometry node. So we're going to click on Shift A and then type in geometry. So what we're going to do here for our input geometry node, just like in our texture coordinate node, just so we can see our caustic map, we need to plug in normal to the first vector. As you can see here, it's already present. But as an added bonus, we are going to be using parametric input and plug it into our rotation. Now, what this does, as you can see here, it made our caustic map look a little bit more complex in our scene. But really, the parametric input is what's really selling the cool caustic look, because what it does is that it properly rotates the texture depending on the angle it is highlighted on, or it's currently visible on, just like any sort of water caustic should be. So if you want to have a little bit of realism, sure, go for parametric. Or if you don't want to, just unplug it. No harm, no foul. But for now, I'm going to be adding my rotation to that one. So this is the first variation of the standard Gobo filter. Again, it's not using a texture coordinate. Sure, you're free to still use texture coordinate node, but if you want to have a little bit more realism, a little bit more of a creative look to your caustic map in your environment, go for a input geometry node. And again, normal to vector, or you can use true normal. It's just basically the exact same thing. Normal or true normal to the first vector, and the parametric input to our rotation for our mapping. Now, the next standard variation is going to be adjusting the colors of our scene, because as it's definitely a little bit wrong in terms of color once we look our reference. So as we can see here, our color for the reference here, it's a little bit orange, or a little bit of a brown tint, I guess. Orange with a brown tint. So we can do that by simply adding a mix node to our scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to press Shift A, and then we're going to add a mix RGB, or a mix node. If you're using Blender 3.0 and below, it's going to be called mix RGB. But if you're using 3.5 and above, 3.1 and above, it's going to be called mix node right here. So for the mix node, we're going to set it to color instead of float, because we need the colors for this one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to plug the result to the emission shader, and then we're going to plug in our image texture color input to our factor. That way, we can easily change the colors of our main texture right here. So if we just open the caustic map, so what this does, these colors right here, it will change the color of this one. The A input will change mainly the mood lighting of our caustic. So let me just change it. Let's try to set it to blue. As you can see right there, it's changing it to blue. Now for the B value, it's only mainly for turning the light on or off in terms of texture. So it's basically turning the texture on or off. So it's mainly doing the factor, I guess, the factor's function. So we can just set it to white if you want it to. So there we go. So mainly, the main controls for the mix node right here is just the A value right here. You can easily change your color. So let me do just that. Try to replicate how it currently looks. So it's a little bit darker. So I'm just trying to replicate the exact scene as best as I can. So it's a little bit brown. So there we go. All right. So more or less, I think I got it. Maybe I'm practically giving it my own creative touch at this point. So let me just adjust the emission color once again back to 150. Okay, so it's still visible. So maybe we can adjust the scale a bit as well. Let's try 12, so we can see. All right, I think it's looking good. Maybe 15. Let's try 15. Okay, no, 12 is fine. 12 is fine. All right, let's try and adjust how it currently looks as well. So does it look weird? Okay, that looks really good for now. Actually, there we go. I think that's much better. Maybe let's reduce it to 11. Let's see how that looks. Okay, not bad. Maybe 10. Well, anyway, this one is an easy part right now, so you can easily just change how your caustic map size would look like via the scale. So it's up to you how you plan on designing your caustic on your caustics. I mean, your quote-unquote fake caustics once you're working on this on your own. Now, so this is our second standard variation by simply adjusting the colors of our light via the mix node. So you can pause the video right here, take a screenshot if you want. So there we go. Now we're going to be moving on to our complex variations. So instead of using our mix node, so actually let me duplicate for you this one. So let's duplicate this one, Shift D, and then let's work on our new complex variation. Now we're still going to be using the exact same node setup, except for the mix node. We're going to be removing that one and plug our color back here in the emission. Now, what we're going to do next is, let me just plug this back in so we can see what we're going to do next. All right, so if for our complex variations, as you can see right here, and if we look at our reference right here, you can see, well, at least in some portions of the light casting in our walls, or basically everywhere in the scene, some portions have a little bit of a dim to it. It's practically non-existent almost if you look farther enough, right? So if you want to achieve this kind of effect, this one is actually super simple. So to achieve that effect here, we're going to be adding a color ramp. So Shift A, and then we're going to be adding a color ramp. And then we're just going to plug it in between our image texture and our emission. And then what we're going to do is we're going to play around with the black color stop right here. Its current position is at 0, so we're going to adjust it to anywhere near 0. So as you can see right here, it's slowly but surely decreasing the brighter shaded areas. It's basically losing the darker shade areas, right? So there we go. So we can just adjust it to how we want it to be, and there we go. Now, as you can see right here, definitely we're gonna still adjust our scale right here. Maybe, okay, I think that's looking okay. Maybe you can adjust it more. All right, I think that's looking nice. Maybe 15. Oh, that's actually nice. And 14. Okay, I think I hit the jackpot at 14. All right, so again with the color ramp. So what the color ramp does is basically adjust and filters out the dark shaded areas of our caustic map and basically removes them from our environment right here. It basically removes them from the light. It's basically telling the light, okay, I'm telling you that there is a dark shaded area here. Don't add light to it. So that's basically its whole function right here. So if you try to move it closer to the white, as you can see, it's turning it off. So maybe don't go too crazy on that. Maybe just keep a balance on everything. Maybe at 0.04, as the same as mine, it should be fine. So let's just try to adjust our emission as well. Try to make it look brighter. Okay, there we go. So more or less, it's looking closer to what we got here. Definitely, the color is not right, but that's easily changeable. But in terms of how the caustic is looking from our reference and how the caustic is looking in our scene, it's definitely a close replication. So I think that's a job well done on my part. Now, what we're going to do next is, just like in our second standard variation, we can also change the colors on this one. But the problem here is, if we try to add a mix node, definitely that's going to be what on the top of your brain right now is you're going to be adding a mix node after the color ramp. But if we try to add a mix node right here, set it to color, and then plug the color of the color ramp to the factor, and the result to the color, it's gone. It's practically gone, right? And then if I try to change the color, almost all of our caustic maps are practically gone, right? So what's the most effective way to adjust our colors if we're going to be using our color ramp? So the most effective way is by using a mix shader. So Shift A, type in mix shader, and then we're going to plug it. We're going to plug our first emission shader right down here, and then we're going to be plugging our mix shader to our light output. So there we go. And then for the second shader right here, we're going to be adding another emission shader. So emission shader, and then plug the emission to here, and then adjust the intensity to, actually, let's change the color for a bit so you can see the changes right here. So currently it does change the overall lighting, but the problem is the light is way too low. The strength is way too low for this emission shader. So let's try to adjust it to maybe at 90, and there we go. We're adjusting the mood light, same as the standard variation. So that's basically it for our complex variations of our Gobo. So let me just adjust it right here if you want to take a screenshot at it. Oops. There we go. So again, If you want a more complex gobo to really utilize the gray shaded areas and let Blender remove them for you, use a color ramp and then plug it into an emission shader. If you don't want to change the mood lighting, you can just remove these two right here, remove the emission shader and the mix shader, and just plug in your original emission shader to your light output. So there we go. That is it for our Gobo project right here. Now, if you want to, of course, if you want to give this a more of a creative touch, you can definitely animate your caustics right here. So what we're going to do is basically just add a keyframe right here in our mapping. Let's say we're going to be trying moving it at right here. Let's try to move it in the x-axis anyway. So we're going to press I on the x-axis, and then let's add a timeline right here. Let's just add a timeline. Okay, where's the timeline? Okay, there we go. And then at frame 100, it's going to be moving at 4.8. And let's maybe max it out to 250. And then let's move it to 4.9. And then press I again. And there we go. We have an animated caustic map right there. So that's basically it, once again, for our little caustic project right here. Now, if you really want to spice up your renders right here, especially on this little project right here, so let's just go to our render to see how this looks. We can go back to our camera. There we go. So we have a little bit of ray of light in our scene. We can add volumetrics as well. So it's a basic volumetric setup. So you can just add a basic cube. Where is my cube? Is this it? Nope. Is this it? Nope. Where is my cube? Where is it? Oh, I think this one. No, it's not. Where is my cube? I can't find my cube. Hang on. Where's my cube? Oh, never mind. It's here. All right, so the cube is right here. So the cube will basically be a volumetric cage. So it's a basic volume scatter. So you just add a material, go to your shading, and then replace your principal BSDF to a volume scatter. And there we go. That's basically it for your basic volumetric cage right here. So you can see the rays of light shining from above. So with that said, hope you guys enjoyed this little video. So good luck on trying to recreate your renders. So I'll see you in the next video.